This moment still haunts me till now, and my life has become a tragedy. That day, 2 years since everything changed, it was supposed to be simple. A beach trip with my son Leonard. My husband Phoenix couldn't make it. He never did. Work always came first, and I was used to that. Used to being alone. But that day, the day didn't feel normal. Not then, and not now. We spread out the towels. The sun was warm, maybe too warm. I laid down, finally feeling free of the world's noise. And I asked Leonard to help to rub some oil on my back. I didn't think twice about it. He's my son, my boy. Why would I? At first, it was nothing. Just his hands, just helping me out. But then I felt it. I felt him linger, lower and lower, and I didn't stop him. Why didn't I stop him? You think you know yourself? You think you know your family. But there's always a moment, one moment that can unravel everything for me. It happened that day on this beach, and I had been married for over 15 years. If you asked anyone who knew us, they'd say we were the perfect couple. A nice house, good kids, and a steady life. But you don't see the cracks. Until you're inside the walls, you don't feel the emptiness, unless you're the one living it for years. Phoenix's job was his world. He was always working, late nights, weekends, holidays. I used to tell myself that he did it for us, that the overtime, the dedication, was for the life he was building for our family. But after so long, that story starts to fall apart. What good is a home if no one's ever in it? I became invisible to him when he came home. He barely looked at me. He stopped asking how I felt, what I wanted, what I needed. We spoke in short sentences, mostly about bills, groceries, and the kids. He loved Leonard and his little sister Isa, but even with them, his presence was like a shadow. He was there, but not really. I used to sit at the table across from him, wondering if he still saw me at all that morning. I remember standing in the kitchen as Phoenix hurried out the door. He grabbed his briefcase, kissed the top of Isa's head, and glanced at me just once. "Sorry, Freya, I can't make it today. Something came up at work." I didn't even argue. I was too busy trying not to look at her. I froze, trying to see her face. My head pounded. I was afraid I might fail else again. Just nodded like I always did, my throat tight. I told myself it was fine. Leonard and I could go on our own. Leonard was 16 back then, tall, lanky, with the same brown eyes his father had, but a softer face. He didn't say much, not even when I told him it would just be the two of us. I think he'd gotten used to his dad bailing too. He just shrugged, grabbed the bags, and followed me to the car. I watched him in the passenger seat. On the way there, earbuds in, staring out the window like teenagers always do. I couldn't help but smile. He was growing up so fast. And sometimes I wondered if I'd blink and lose him too. The drive to the beach felt endless. My mind wandered, as it always did, to Phoenix. I thought about all the things we used to do together. Movie, nights, long walks, trips to nowhere, just for the fun of it. I thought about the way he used to touch me, the way his eyes would light up when he saw me. I hadn't felt that in years. I hadn't felt anything. I was so tired of being unseen. Leonard helped me carry the bags to a quiet spot near the water. I laid out the towels while he set up the umbrella. I don't know why. I suddenly felt the need to talk to him. Maybe it was because he was the only one there. Maybe I just needed someone to hear me. "It's nice to get out, don't you think?" I said, trying to sound cheerful. He just nodded, pushing his hair back with his hand. "Yeah, Mom, it's nice." I laid down on the towel, feeling the heat of the sun soak into my skin. I didn't move for a while. So I just let myself go still, like I was trying to let the weight of the last few years lift off me, even for just an hour. But then I remembered the oil. I sat up and turned to Leonard. "Can you help me rub this on my back?" I asked. "I can't reach it myself." He looked at me for a second, almost hesitant, before taking the bottle from my hand. I lay back down, face to the towel, and waited. The first touch was gentle, careful. His hands were unsure, like he didn't want to hurt me. I smiled to myself because it reminded me of when he was little, when he used to hold my hand across the street. His hands had been so small back then. "You can press a little harder." I told him, my voice muffled, "It's okay." He listened then. His hands grew more firm as he rubbed the oil across my shoulders and down my back. I closed my eyes and tried to focus on the warmth, the rhythm of his touch. For a moment, I let myself enjoy it. It had been so long since anyone had touched me at all, and that thought hit me harder than I wanted to admit. But then I felt his hands move lower slowly, carefully down the curve of my back. My breath caught in my throat, and I opened my mouth to say something, but nothing came out. My mind raced, but I stayed silent. I told myself it was fine, that he was just helping, that I was imagining things, but I wasn't. His hands hovered there for a moment, near the edge of where my towel ended. I could feel his hesitation. I could feel my own. And instead of stopping him, I said, It's okay. You can rub there too." The words hung in the air, like something poisonous, and the moment they left my mouth, I knew I couldn't take them back. Leonard didn't say anything. He didn't stop either. I squeezed my eyes shut and felt his hands on me, lower than they should have been. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he might hear it. I wanted to move, to sit up, to tell him to stop, but I didn't. I couldn't. I let it happen. Even now, I don't know why. Maybe it was the loneliness. Maybe I was too desperate to feel wanted, even if it was wrong. Or maybe I just didn't care anymore that day on the beach when everything inside me broke, and nothing would ever be the same again. By the way, if you've made it this far into the story, thank you for sticking with me. I know it's not an easy thing to hear, and I appreciate you listening. If you're finding this video interesting, or if you think there's someone who could relate to what I'm sharing, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps me keep sharing stories like this and lets me know I'm not alone out here. All right, let's get back to it. After that day at the beach, something shifted. I couldn't ignore it. What I felt, what I saw, and how Leonard looked at me afterward, it wasn't just a lingering gaze or a passing moment. It was constant. Every time I caught his eye, there was something different in him. Something I didn't want to name, but couldn't unsee. I tried to bury it. When we got back home that evening, I did everything I could to act normal. I made dinner. I asked Leonard about school. I folded laundry late into the night, my hands shaking the whole time. I kept replaying everything that happened. His hands, the way he lingered, the tension I felt in my own body. I hated myself for it, and I had him for making me feel this way about my own son. Phoenix didn't notice a thing. He came home late, as usual, his tie loose, his face tired. He kissed my cheek out of habit, just a ghost of what it used to be. "Long day?" I asked, hoping for some kind of conversation. He grunted and nodded, already halfway to the living room. It was always like this. His presence felt like an afterthought, and I felt invisible again. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Phoenix scored softly beside me. The house was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I kept thinking about Leonard, about his hands, and His gaze, I knew it wasn't right. I knew I should stop it, whatever it was, before it went any further. But there was another part of me, something dark, something lonely, that wanted to hold on to it, that craved the attention, the touch, the feeling of being seen. The days passed, and Leonard didn't say anything, but his silence was louder than words. He didn't avoid me. Not exactly. Instead, it was like he stayed closer. I'd catch him watching me when I cooked, when I cleaned, when I sat alone on the couch at night, and I let it happen. I didn't stop myself. Then came the next weekend. It was hot again, and the house felt stifling. Phoenix was gone, working some last-minute ship, leaving me and Leonard alone, just like before. I asked him if he wanted to go back to the beach, just the two of us. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I thought being outside would help clear my mind. Maybe I wanted to test myself to see if I could push it all away. The drive was quiet this time. Leonard didn't wear his earbuds, though. He just sat there, looking out the window, his knee bouncing restlessly. I wanted to say something, anything to break the silence, but every time I opened my mouth, the words stuck in my throat. When we got to the beach, it was almost empty. I remember how blue the water looked, how the wind felt on my face. I spread out the towels again, just like before. Leonard helped me set everything up. I didn't ask him to rub oil on my back. This time I couldn't. Instead, I laid there with my eyes closed, pretending everything was fine. But even with my eyes shut, I could feel his gaze. I could feel him watching me. The real breaking point came later. 6 months later, I was still down for it. Leonard stood by me, watching me, my mind wandering through memories of what it was like to fall in love with River. That afternoon, we decided to rinse off at the beach showers before heading home. It was supposed to be quick, just to get the sand off our skin, but something happened then that I still can't explain. When we reached the showers, Leonard stepped under first, letting the water run down his back. I stood off to the side, watching him for a moment, before I stepped in, too. I don't know what came over me, but I peeled off my outer clothing and stood beside him. The water cooled against my skin. Leonard looked at me, startled. I don't know if it was surprise, confusion, or something else entirely, but he didn't say a word. I glanced at him, then really looked at him, and said, "You should take off your shorts too. You need to rinse properly." I don't know why I said it. Maybe I was testing him, testing myself. He hesitated for a second, then did as I said, sliding his shirts off, and there we were together, alone. The water pouring down on us, washing everything away, except what we were both feeling. I turned my back to him and asked softly, "Help me with my back." And I leaned the back of my head against the pavement. He did. His hands were careful again, just like before. But there was no mistaking the tension. I felt it in him. I felt it in me. When he touched my waist, I froze. The air seemed to thicken around us, the sound of the water drowning out everything else. I could have walked away. I could have stopped it. But instead, I leaned back closer to him. I reached for his hands and guided them to my chest. And when I did, he didn't pull away. What happened next, I can't explain. I won't explain it. It was a moment, a blur of need, loneliness, and something else I don't want to name. It wasn't soft, and it wasn't slow. It was desperate, passionate, wrong in every way, but I couldn't stop it. I didn't want to. And when it was over, we just stood there, the water still pouring down on us, washing away the evidence, but not the truth. He held me, then held me like no one else had in years, and I led him. Afterwards, we didn't speak. We dried off, packed up, and walked back to the car in silence. I watched Leonard from the corner of my eye, his face flushed, his movements stiff. I knew I'd ruined everything. I knew we'd crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. And I wondered if it would feel like this again. Yet for the first time in years, I felt alive. The ride home was silent at first. The car felt too small, too heavy, like the air itself was pressing down on us. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to focus on the road, but my mind was spinning. I could still feel him, Leonard, his hands, his body, the weight of everything we'd just done. I kept stealing glances at him in the passenger seat. He sat stiffly, staring out the window, his face flushed, his jaw tight. And then out of nowhere he spoke. "Mom," he said, his voice low, almost unsure. I didn't look at him. I couldn't, but I heard him. What just happened? Back there. My heart skipped a beat for a moment. I thought about pretending I didn't hear him, about brushing it off, changing the subject, but there was no point in pretending anymore. Not after what we'd done. I took a shaky breath and answered, "I don't know." It was the truth, or at least the closest thing to it. I didn't know what had happened or why. All I knew was that everything had changed. We didn't talk again till we pulled into the driveway. I turned off the car, but neither of us moved. Leonard finally looked at me. Really looked at me. And somehow, from here to Earth, I feel more beautiful. I went on. For the first time, I saw something in his eyes that scared me. It wasn't confusion or guilt or even shame. It was longing. "How long have you felt like this?" he asked. His words sent chills through me because I'd been asking myself the same question. I looked at him then, and it was like a dam broke inside me. "I don't know," I whispered. Maybe longer than I want to admit." We were both quiet after that, just sitting there in the dark. I thought that would be it, that we'd go inside, try to forget it all and pretend nothing had happened. But Leonard had other ideas. Before I could open the door, he leaned over and kissed me. It was soft at first, hesitant, like he was afraid I'd pull away, but I didn't. I let him kiss me, and I kissed him back, and then I lost control. I don't know if it was the loneliness, the years of neglect, or the way Leonard looked at me like no one had in so long, but I let it happen, right there outside our house. Leonard pulled me into him, his hands sliding over me like they belonged there. I felt alive. I felt wanted. I felt seen for the first time in years. I didn't care about anything else. I don't know how long we stayed like that, tangled up in each other, but eventually we moved inside. I don't remember much about the walk to the door, just the feeling of his hand on mine, the quiet between us, buzzing like electricity. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Once we were inside, everything escalated, like we'd been holding back for too long and the dam had finally burst. The next few days were a blur. Leonard stayed close to me, always finding reasons to brush against me or look at me when no one else was watching. I'd tell myself to stop, to pull away, to end whatever this was. But every time I looked at him, I saw the same loneliness I felt. It was like we were mirrors of each other, reflecting back the same need, the same emptiness, and I couldn't say no. I didn't want to. At night, I'd lie in bed next to Phoenix, staring at the SO link, listening to the sound of his breathing. I'd think about Leonard in the next room, about the way his hands felt, the way he made me feel alive again. And then I'd close my eyes, guilt curling up in my chest like a snake. I knew it couldn't last. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop. The tension between us grew stronger every day until it finally exploded. It was late one evening. Phoenix was at work again. Isa was asleep, and Leonard and I were in the kitchen. I was washing dishes, trying to keep my mind off everything, when I felt him behind me. I turned around, and there he was, looking at me, the same way he had on the beach. "Leonard," I said softly, trying to warn him, but he didn't stop. He stepped closer, so close I could feel his breath on my neck. "Mom," he whispered, "I can't stop thinking about you." I froze. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I wanted to tell him to stop, to go back to his room, to leave me alone, but I didn't. Instead, I looked up at him and I said, "The one thing I shouldn't have." That was the moment. Everything fell apart. Leonard kissed me again, harder, this time desperate. And I kissed him back. I didn't care that it was wrong. I didn't care about Phoenix or Aya or the life we'd built. All I cared about was him, Leonard, my son, the only person who made me feel like I mattered. Since that day on the beach, things haven't gone back to normal. In fact, I'm not sure they ever will. Leonard and we crossed line one that can't be erased, no matter how hard I try to convince myself otherwise. What started as a moment has turned into something I can't control. The guilt is there, heavy, constant, but it doesn't stop me. And that's the part that scares me the most. I look at my husband Phoenix and my daughter every day, and I wonder how they don't see it, how they don't notice the cracks that are spreading through our family. Maybe they're too caught up in their own lives to see me slipping, or maybe I've just gotten better at hiding it. But deep down, I know this can't last forever. Secrets have a way of coming out, and when they do, the fallout will destroy everything I've tried to stop. I've told myself, over and over again, that this is wrong, that Leonard deserves better, that I deserved better, that every time he touches me, every time he looks at me, like I'm the only person in the world, I lose myself. He makes me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in years, maybe ever. And that's the truth I have to live with. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if I can fix it. And that's why I'm sharing my story with you. Maybe someone out there has an answer, something I haven't thought of. Maybe you can help me see a way out of this mess I've made before it's too late. So please, if you have advice, if you've been in a situation like this, or know someone who has, I want to hear from you. And if nothing else, let this be a warning. Loneliness can push you to places you never thought you'd go. Don't let yourself get lost like I did. Don't let your world fall apart before you realize what's happening. Because once you cross that line, there's no going back. Thank you for listening. Please share your thoughts, like this video if you found it helpful, and subscribe for more. I need to know I'm not alone. Sometimes the biggest betrayals aren't the ones we commit against others, but the ones we commit against ourselves.